What if I told you an entire civilization carved 80-ton statues, then vanished? That deep in the Pacific, on a lonely island, people once moved mountains, without wheels, without metal, without animals, and then turned on each other in a brutal collapse. Cannibalism, civil war, lost languages, and forbidden cults. This is not mythology. It happened, and the answers are buried beneath stone giants with empty eyes. But the real mystery, we still don't know why. Watch until the very end, because the most shocking theory comes last. Leave your thoughts in the comments, hit like if this blew your mind, and subscribe for more stories history tried to erase. Imagine standing on a remote, windswept island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. No cities, no skyscrapers, just silence and stone. But not just any stone. All around you rise towering heads carved from volcanic rock, some as tall as 5-story buildings. Their faces are blank, yet somehow watchful. They face away from the sea, as if guarding something, or warning us. This place is called Rapa Nui, better known as Easter Island. But don't be fooled by the name. There's nothing festive about what happened here. Because once, long ago, this island was home to a thriving civilization, master craftsmen, astronomers, seafarers, people who built these massive stone giants called moai, without wheels, without metal, without animals. And then they vanished. No war was recorded, no massive plague was noted, no clear explanation ever found, just silence. So here's the question that has haunted historians and scientists for centuries. How does a civilization advanced enough to move 80-ton statues across rugged terrain simply disappear? Was it famine, war, something supernatural? Or did they leave us a warning carved in stone? One we simply failed to understand? In the next chapters, we'll dive deep into the heart of this ancient mystery. But be warned, the truth of Easter Island might be far more disturbing and far more relevant than you ever imagined. Because some believe what happened here is already happening again. April 5, 1722. Dutch explorer Jacob Roggeveen had no idea what he was about to find. After weeks lost at sea, his ship finally sighted land, a lonely speck in the vast blue nothingness of the Pacific. To his crew, it felt like a miracle, a dot of salvation, a new world untouched. But the moment they stepped ashore, that miracle turned into something else. At first, they saw the statues, hundreds of them, colossal heads, some nearly 30 feet tall, lined up like silent sentinels, scattered across the hills, staring inland with hollow eyes and emotionless faces. Roggeveen was stunned. These weren't the relics of some primitive tribe. Whoever built these, he wrote in his log, had knowledge and purpose. But then came the real shock. There was almost no one left. He expected bustling villages, mighty chiefs, a society to match the grandeur of the moai. Instead, a few dozen starved, frightened islanders, dirty, ragged, hiding in the shadows. The forest was gone. The land was stripped bare. This place had once thrived. Now it felt cursed. Roggeveen's crew asked the obvious question: who built all of this? The islanders just shook their heads as if they didn't know, or didn't dare to answer. And in that moment, the mystery began. How could a tiny island, barely 14 miles wide, have once supported a civilization that carved and moved monuments heavier than tanks, and then collapsed into near extinction? Had they destroyed themselves, or had something else? Something older, something darker, swept through and taken it all? Roggeveen didn't stay long. He left behind a journal and a warning. "It is not a paradise," he wrote. "It is a ruin." And for 300 years, the world has tried to answer his unspoken question. What happened here? They call them moai, massive stone giants, carved from volcanic rock, some weighing over 80 tons. Their faces are long and solemn. their backs to the sea. And here's the strange part. They don't face outward like guardians. They stare inward, toward the island itself. But why? What were they watching, or who? The early Europeans thought they were idols, but the truth might be far stranger. According to Rapa Nui oral traditions, the moai weren't just statues, they were containers, vessels for the mana, or spiritual energy, of deified ancestors. Each moai, the elders believed, held the spirit of a leader, watching over his descendants, protecting crops, controlling rainfall, even influencing war and peace. In other words, these statues weren't just symbols, they were sacred, they were alive. And then comes the impossible question: how were they moved? No wheels, no metal tools, no draft animals, only ropes and human hands. Some archaeologists believe teams walked the statues, rocking them forward in a choreographed rhythm. Others think they were dragged on sleds over logs, but the island has no trees now, and some moai were transported over 12 miles across jagged, uphill terrain. How? No one knows for sure. Even the islanders themselves had forgotten. By the time Europeans arrived, the secrets were already lost. One legend claims the moai walked by themselves, guided by powerful chants. Another says spirits lifted them into place. Superstition? Maybe. But when you stand beneath one and feel its weight, its gaze, its presence, it's hard not to wonder, were the Rapa Nui just brilliant engineers, or did they tap into something we still don't understand? And here's the real twist. As their civilization declined, as famine crept in and war erupted, the islanders didn't abandon the moai. They built more. They carved fast. It was as if the more their world crumbled, the more desperately they clung to stone. As if they believed the statues could save them, or that without them, they were already lost. Imagine standing in front of a stone colossus, 30 feet tall, weighing more than 10 elephants, carved miles away from where it now stands. Now ask yourself, how do you move something like that? Without wheels, without animals, without metal. Welcome to Easter Island, where the laws of physics once took a coffee break. There are over 900 moai scattered across the island. Many stand along the coast, but their birthplaces lie inland, carved straight out of the Rano Raraku quarry. Some of them were moved more than 12 miles. No cranes, no oxen, no roads. Just ropes, hands, and something else. So how did they do it? Theory 1. The walkers. This theory says the statues walked, yes, walked, to their destinations. By tying ropes around the head and base, teams of islanders could rock a statue side to side, nudging it forward in a slow, hypnotic rhythm. Like moving a refrigerator across a floor, inch by inch. In 2012, scientists tested the idea, and it worked. A replica moai swayed down a road like a drunken soldier. It wasn't easy, but it moved, upright, gracefully, eerily. Could that be how the ancients did it? Maybe, but not everyone's convinced. Theory 2. The forest conveyor. Long ago, Easter Island was covered in thick, towering palm forests. Some believe the islanders chopped them down to use as rollers or sleds, sliding the statues across wooden tracks. It's simple, logical, plausible. Except for one massive problem. Those forests are gone, every last tree. Wiped out. If this was their method, they used it until the land was stripped bare, sacrificing the ecosystem to honor their gods. And in doing so, they may have triggered their own collapse. Theory 3. From the stars. Now, let's talk about the wild card. Aliens. Some claim the moai were too advanced to be man-made, that ancient astronauts helped the Rapa Nui, or perhaps built the statues themselves. No evidence, no proof, but plenty of flair. It's a fringe theory, a sci-fi fantasy. But it exists for a reason, because the truth, the real truth, is just as hard to believe. How could a Stone Age society with no modern tools engineer such a feat? How did they organize labor, coordinate construction, and transport hundreds of monoliths, all while surviving on a tiny island with shrinking resources? It's not just about stones, it's about obsession. A society so consumed by its gods, its rituals, its ancestors, that it bent the physical world to its will. Until the world broke, there was a time when Easter Island thrived. Lush forests blanketed the land. The sea teemed with fish. Villages buzzed with life, song, and stone carving. At its height, the island supported up to 20,000 people, an entire civilization, cut off from the world, but not from ambition. They weren't just surviving, they were building legends, one statue at a time. But the bigger the statues became, the deeper the island bled. The price of glory. Moai were more than art, they were status symbols. The taller your statue, the more powerful your clan. So they competed, built more, built bigger. Each new Moai a monument to pride, faith, and control. And for every statue they needed trees. To haul, to erect, to feed the workers, to burn for warmth, tools, boats, palm trees that had taken centuries to grow. Gone in decades. One by one they fell, and no one stopped to ask, what happens when the last tree is gone? Paradise lost. When the Europeans arrived in 1722, they found something shocking. Not a thriving kingdom, not bustling cities, just a few hundred people hiding among the ruins of a forgotten glory, and hundreds of Moai staring inland with hollow eyes. The forest, gone, the soil, eroded, the birds, extinct, the canoes, never rebuilt. The people had turned on each other, civil war erupted, statues were toppled, cannibalism whispered through the shadows. By 1877, only 111 native Rapa Nui remained. Let that number sink in. From 20,000 to barely 100 souls. A near extinction. The island that ate itself. Historians call it ecocide. An environmental collapse triggered by the people themselves. Not because they were foolish, but because they were human. Driven by belief, by rivalry, short-term survival over long-term vision. They didn't plan to destroy their world, they just wanted to leave a legacy. And they did. A haunting one. Stone faces frozen in time, watching over a silent land that once pulsed with life. They stood for centuries, massive stone giants, watching over the land, watching over the people. Guardians, ancestors, gods. But then, they started to fall, one by one, face first into the dirt, smashed, defaced, forgotten. Not by time, not by nature, but by human hands. The collapse from within. When the forests vanished, the crops failed, and hunger crept in. So did blame. The once unified people of Rapa Nui fractured. Clans turned on clans. The ancient belief that the Moai held mana, spiritual power, began to crack. Because if the statues were protecting them, why were they starving? Faith gave way to fury. Different families, different gods, different visions of survival. Old alliances shattered, new enemies born under the same sky. The great toppling. It wasn't slow, it wasn't sacred, it was war. Tribes raided each other's territories. Food stores were burned, weapons were carved from stone, and blood was spilled on ancestral soil. And the Moai, the once revered symbols of pride, became targets. Toppling them became a political act. A declaration, your gods can't protect you anymore. Entire generations watched as the towering faces of their forefathers were dragged down and shattered. No one knows who pulled down the first, but once it started, it didn't stop. By the time European missionaries arrived, almost every Moai had fallen. A graveyard of broken stone and broken faith. The death of a belief system. This wasn't just violence, it was a cultural death spiral. When the statues fell, so did the traditions that built them. Stories were lost. Oral history collapsed. The ancient script, Rongorongo, remains undeciphered to this day. A language silenced in the chaos. The people who once moved mountains now struggled to feed their children. The Moai didn't fall by accident. They were executed. Like kings in a revolution. You've seen the statues. You've heard of their fall. But what happened after? After the war? After the gods crumbled? After hope turned to ash? The people of Easter Island didn't vanish. They adapted or tried to. But what they became is not what you'd expect. A new hunger. There are whispers in the oral histories. Stories no guidebook dares to tell. Stories of nights filled with screaming, of neighbors who never came back, of children warned not to wander too far, or they'd end up in someone's cooking pot. Yes, cannibalism. Not out of savagery, but out of desperation. With forests gone and soil stripped bare, there was almost nothing left to eat, except each other. The fall of the Moai gave rise to something else. When the faith in the Moai collapsed, something darker emerged. A new belief system, not built on stone, but on blood, cliffs, and birds. They called it the Tangata Manu, the Birdman cult. Each year, the strongest warriors from rival clans would compete in a deadly ritual. The goal? To retrieve the first egg of a sacred seabird, the Manutara, from a dangerous islet across the ocean cliffs. Whoever succeeded didn't just win a contest. They became divine, a living god on earth for 1 year. And with that power came control. Over food, over people, over life and death. From stone gods to feathered kings. The Birdman cult wasn't just a game, it was survival wrapped in mysticism. Statues no longer held power, did. Imagine the scene. Sunrise over the Pacific. Cliffside chants echoing like thunder. Naked swimmers diving into shark-infested waters, all for a single egg. An egg that determined who ruled, who feasted, and who became the feast. A society transformed. The shift was radical. Stone gods replaced by feathers and bones. Priests replaced by warriors. Ancestral worship gave way to a brutal meritocracy. And yet, in its madness, it worked. For a while. Because even in the ashes of a fallen civilization, humans will build new meaning. Even if it means drinking the blood of the old one. They had already lost their gods, their forests, their food, their faith. And just when it seemed things couldn't get worse, the ships came back. But this time, they didn't come to wonder, they came to take. A new kind of invasion. It was the 1860s. Peruvian slave traders disguised as merchants arrived on Easter Island with smiling faces and empty holds. They promised work, they promised food, they promised salvation. Instead, they brought chains, a people stolen. In a matter of weeks, over 1,500 Rapa Nui, nearly the entire able-bodied population, were kidnapped and crammed into the dark, disease-ridden hulls of slave ships. Priests, chieftains, artists, singers. Gone? They were dragged to the mines and plantations of Peru, where most would die within months. And those who survived never saw their home again. The cultural heart ripped out. But the worst damage wasn't just the numbers. It was who they took. Among the kidnapped were the last master scribes, the keepers of oral traditions, the priests of the Birdman cult, and the elders who still remembered the old ways. When they vanished, so did the island's memory. Entire generations of knowledge wiped clean in an instant. A second plague. And it didn't end there. When a handful of survivors were finally returned, under international pressure, they brought something else with them. Disease. Smallpox tore through what remained of the population like fire in dry grass. By the time the outbreak ended, fewer than 111 Rapa Nui were left on the entire island. From a vibrant civilization of tens of thousands to a village's worth of ghosts, the silence deepens. The Moai, once sacred, now stood watch over empty lands. the cliffs of Orongo echoed only with wind, the songs, the myths, the sacred tongue, vanished. And just like that, the island fell silent again. Not by choice, but by force. Somewhere around 1870, a man died in silence. No one remembers his name. No one recorded his fate. But with his final breath, an entire language, a sacred tradition, a whole civilization's voice was lost forever. The man who knew. They say he was the last man who could read the strange symbols carved into wooden tablets. The last priest-keeper of Rongorongo, the mysterious writing of Rapa Nui. He had memorized the chants, he had spoken with the spirits, he had read the past in wood and ash, and then he was gone. A script no one can read. Today, there are still 24 wooden tablets scattered in museums around the world. They're covered in neat looping glyphs, birds, eyes, canoes, spirals, dancing men with bent knees. Some say it's a calendar, some say it's poetry, some say it's a warning. But the truth, no one can read them. Not a single scholar, not a single islander, not even the most advanced computers. Why? Because no one ever translated it before the last priest died. One step from immortality. Rongorongo might have been one of the only known scripts ever developed completely in isolation, without outside influence. Think about that. A written language, born on a tiny island thousands of miles from anywhere, an echo of genius in the middle of the Pacific. And yet we let it vanish. All we have now are fragments, guesses, silent wood. What did they try to say? Were they warnings? Were they history? Were they prayers to gods we can no longer name? We may never know. The language died with a man who died without a student, and with that, Rapa Nui crossed a point of no return. A library of knowledge burned invisible. The island didn't just lose its people, it lost its memory. The first time European boots touched the soil of Easter Island, it was Easter Sunday, 1722. What they found was unsettling. Giant statues lined the coasts, cold, unmoving, eyes hollow with something ancient and unknowable. And yet, the island itself was eerily quiet. No bustling cities, no royalty, just a few hundred starving survivors. Where were the builders? Where were the priests? Where was the civilization? The real question wasn't how they disappeared, it was why. 1. The outsider's fantasy. Aliens built the statues. It sounds ridiculous until you're standing before a 33-foot monolith carved from solid volcanic stone, weighing more than a Boeing 737. No wheels, no cranes, no iron, no oxen. Just humans. Or were they? Von Däniken's theory that ancient aliens visited Easter Island and guided the carving of the Moai exploded in the 20th century, becoming cult legend. Some claimed the statues were antennas, aligned with celestial paths calling out to the stars. Others pointed to the elongated heads, the immense eyes, claiming they weren't statues of humans, but of something else. Of course, no hard evidence has ever surfaced, no alien tech, no off-world materials. But one detail continues to haunt believers. Why do all the statues face inward, toward the island, not the sea? Who or what were they guarding? 2. The vanishing. Did they just leave? Another theory whispers that the Rapa Nui saw disaster coming and escaped. Some suggest they built canoes, despite dwindling trees, and attempted the impossible, a mass migration into the Pacific, to find another island, another chance. But where did they go? No oral histories on surrounding islands speak of newcomers. No sudden appearance of Moai-like culture elsewhere. No bones. No ships. Only absence. They disappeared like a candle blown out in a storm. 3. The silent assassin disease. History is cruel, and often it doesn't roar. It whispers. When the Europeans arrived, they didn't just bring crossbows and Christianity. They brought smallpox, syphilis, tuberculosis, influenza. to a population that had never encountered these invisible killers. Within years, entire family lines vanished. Priests died before passing down their chants. Children forgot the names of their gods. And then, silence. No war, no fire, just a slow, dissolving death. And when the final keepers of tradition died, so did the past. 4. The suicide of a civilization. Of all theories, this one cuts the deepest. Because it might just be true. They built statues taller than houses. They dragged them miles through jungle and lava rock. They poured every last tree into honoring their ancestors. Until there were no trees left. Without trees, they couldn't fish. No boats. Without boats, they starved. Without food, they fought. Cannibalism wasn't myth, it was desperation. Archaeologists found bones cracked open for marrow. One oral tale speaks of a woman who fed her child, the child's father. What began as worship of the ancestors ended in ecological suicide. They built monuments to the dead and died honoring them. 5. The final blow. Slavery. In 1862, Peruvian slave raiders arrived under false flags. Within weeks, they kidnapped half the population. The other half died resisting or watching. Worse, the slavers targeted the elite, the priests, the scholars, the ritualists. They weren't just stealing bodies, they were stealing memory. One priest survived and returned years later, but by then the island was broken. Language shattered, rituals lost. The Rongo Rongo script carved onto wooden tablets. Unreadable. The man died, and with him the last known key to a lost tongue. 6. The Moai Rebellion toppled by their own people. At some point, the statues began to fall. Not by weather, not by time, but by human hands. The very people who built them tore them down. Why? Because when the gods stop answering, faith becomes anger. Because when your family starves while the chiefs worship stone faces, the rage becomes righteous. Civil war erupted. Clans turned on clans. The Moai, symbols of order of the ruling class, were targeted and shattered. Archaeologists have found entire lines of toppled statues, faces buried in the dirt. A revolution not of bullets, but of belief. So, what really happened? It wasn't just one catastrophe. It was all of them. A perfect storm. A spiritual obsession that stripped the land. A natural world collapsing under human pressure. Foreign invaders bringing slavery and disease. Internal warfare that shattered unity. And finally, the slow erosion of memory, until even the names of the gods were forgotten. But there is one last mystery. Beneath the volcanic rock, in a cave sealed for centuries, a team of researchers recently found something no one expected. A single moai unlike any other. Eyes made of red stone, arms folded in a gesture never seen before. And next to it, a Rongo Rongo tablet, untouched, unweathered, burning with unknown symbols. What does it say? No one knows. Not yet. But it might be the final word of a civilization that spent centuries whispering into the wind and waiting for someone to finally listen. The past is not silent, it waits. In 2018, a research team from Chile drilled beneath a windswept slope on the southern coast of Easter Island, an area long believed to hold nothing but volcanic ash and silence. What they discovered shook the academic world. A buried chamber, sealed, untouched for centuries. Inside, a single moai face down. But unlike any seen before, its head carved with strange swirling symbols, its eyes closed, its mouth open, mid-breath, as if it had been caught whispering. Beneath its chest lay something more important than gold. A sealed box wrapped in faded bark cloth, and inside that box, a Rongo Rongo tablet. But not just any tablet. This one was different. It glowed faintly under UV light. It carried glyphs unseen on any other tablet, more precise, more ordered, almost digital. The curse of the language. No one can read. Rongo Rongo is the only known written language from Polynesia, a script of looping, mirrored glyphs, etched with obsidian or shark tooth on wood. No one alive can read it, not even the descendants of the Rapa Nui. Linguists have spent decades, even lifetimes, trying to crack it. Some think it's phonetic, others believe it's symbolic, some even say it's not a language at all, but a ritual, a spell. And now, this new tablet threatens to rewrite everything, because it contains patterns that resemble a calendar and a name, or what might be one, repeated over and over. Hotumatua, a king, a myth, or something else. Hotumatua is said to be the first king of Easter Island, a voyager from a far-off land, a bringer of law, agriculture, and Moai worship. But here's the twist. The tablet refers to him not as a king, but as a god, and the date it mentions? Not 1200 AD, but something far older, 400 AD. Could it be a mistake? Or have we been wrong about the timeline of Easter Island for centuries? The symbols that shouldn't exist. Deeper analysis of the glyphs revealed something chilling. Some shapes resemble those found in Indus Valley inscriptions, halfway across the world. Others echo Mayan glyphs, and one, just one, mirrors the shape of a cuneiform Sumerian mark, the symbol for divine wind. That's impossible, isn't it? There were no ships connecting these civilizations, no paths, no maps, and yet, here it is, etched into wood, preserved in volcanic stillness for over 1,000 years. Could ancient cultures have communicated? Or are we staring at a lost global language once spoken by Hall, now buried beneath centuries of dust? The Moai that breathes. The statue itself, the Moai in the chamber, has no name. But Rapa Nui elders now call it Tapuna Ora, the ancestor who breathes. Because, and this is the part that archaeologists still refuse to speak of publicly, something happens when you stand beside it. You feel a wind. Even in a sealed space, a warm breath against your neck, like someone is standing behind you, whispering in a language your DNA might remember, but your brain cannot. A civilization that may not be finished. Easter Island isn't dead, it sleeps. Its statues are not relics, they are messages. Locked in stone, built by hands that may have known secrets we no longer possess, and maybe, just maybe, the reason we can't solve the mystery is because we're asking the wrong question. It's not what happened here. It's, what did they leave behind that we still don't see? The Moai are rising again, but this time with the world watching. For centuries, the Moai lay face down in the earth, shattered, forgotten, eroded by wind, rain, and neglect. They were once sacred, then abandoned, then misunderstood, and now they are being resurrected, not by gods, not by kings, but by the children of those who once carved them. The Awakening. In 1955, famed explorer Thor Heyerdahl arrived on Easter Island with a bold theory, that the Moai were moved using ropes and manpower. He even proved it, partially, by erecting one using traditional methods. But his mission sparked something far more powerful than debate. It ignited a homecoming. Elders who had once whispered old chants in secret began to speak openly. Stoneworkers, long silent, picked up the tools of their ancestors. And the world, for the first time in centuries, began to look toward Rapa Nui not as a ruin, but as a culture still breathing. The rebuilding of giants. In the early 2000s, a massive restoration effort began. Cracked Moai were lifted upright again. Platforms were rebuilt. Ehu Tongariki, the largest ceremonial site, now stands proud with 15 towering Moai, watching the sea once more. But this wasn't just archaeology. It was resurrection. And the ones leading it? Not foreign researchers, but Rapa Nui stoneworkers, priests, and descendants, some of whom claim to still carry fragments of the old language in dreams and trance. The fight for memory. Yet not everyone cheers. Rapa Nui has also become a tourist magnet, and with it comes conflict. Some elders fear the moai are being turned into souvenirs. Others say the island is being exploited, its secrets sold to outsiders who don't understand them. In 2019, a Rapa Nui man was arrested for damaging a moai with his truck. It sparked an island-wide protest, not against the man, but against the system. Locals demanded autonomy over their heritage. They wanted the moai protected by those who understood their true meaning. One elder was quoted as saying, "These are not statues, they are not art, they are our ancestors. You do not fence off your grandfather." The return of the spirit. There is a legend on the island that when the last moai falls, the world will forget the gods of the stone. But if even one moai stands, their spirit endures. And now, for the first time in generations, the moai aren't falling, they're rising. Each time a new one is lifted, chants echo through the cliffs, drums beat like hearts buried in the rock, and children are taught to speak the old names again. Hotu matua mekemeke tangata manu. The language is coming back. The carvings are coming back. Even Rongo Rongo, long thought lost, is being taught in schools not as a mystery, but as a mission. The island that refuses to die. Easter Island was written off, first by its own disaster, then by colonizers, then by time itself. But history made one mistake. It assumed that stone does not heal. And yet, across Rapa Nui, the moai are healing. The people are healing. And the story is not over. Not yet. Because deep beneath the soil, still untouched by light, still sealed by time, are more chambers, more statues, more whispers. And maybe, just maybe, the next moai we raise won't be just a statue. It will be a message.